Hello everyone, this is the Goodly Christian Witch, and this is a video that's another installment in our series we're doing on the Pagan, Wiccan, and the Wheel of the Year for Witches. We're doing the Wiccan holidays, and we're reading from the book called 8 Sabbats for Witches by Janet and Stewart Farrar. And we're also going to do, before we start, a small, simple ritual to call the quarters, and then we will also dismiss. Just before we do that, we're going to go ahead and just read a little from the opening pages of this book so we can make sure that you get a good idea of what this book's about and how wonderful it really is. It's one of my favorite books, so I've decided to honor the holidays of witches by reading from this book. Janet and Stewart Farrar also published a book called What Witches Do, also The Witch's Goddess, and also The Witch's Way. Now, 8 Sabbats for Witches and Rites for Birth, Marriage, and Death by Janet and Stewart Farrar, with line illustrations by Stewart Farrar and photographs by Ian David and Stewart Farrar. It's published by Phoenix Publishing Inc. And it was published by Janet and Stewart Farrar in 1981. Again, Phoenix Publishing Incorporated. Okay, so before we start again, we're going to go ahead and call the quarters using these stones here. Alright, so before we start, we're going to call in a sacred time, and you use a sacred time by ringing the bell. So we're going to ring the bell to call in the sacred time. And then next, we're going to call in a sacred space or a sacred place by calling the 4 corners, and we're also going to call in above and below, zenith and nadir. So it makes sort of a sphere for this. Okay. So we're going to start we're going to start in the east. Now some people start in the north. In my tradition, we learn to start in the east. So I'm just going to stick with that one for now. But again, you can start in the north. So in the beginning, we're going to go ahead and go clockwise, or that's called Deosil, I believe. And we're going to, then when we close at the end, after we finish reading the book, then we're going to close by going counterclockwise, which, if memory serves, is Widdershins. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start that now. I would like to call the guardians of the watchtower of the east. I would like to call the archangel of air, who is Raphael, who is residing over the warm, moist winds of the east. I'd like to call the elementals of air the sylphs. Come into our circle now and lend us your magic. I would like to now call in the guardians of the watchtower of the south. And I'd like to call in the archangel of the south, the archangel Michael. And he is the angel who resides over the hot, dry winds of the south. And also to call in the elementals of fire, who are the salamanders. I would now like to call in the guardian of the watchtower of the west, the archangel Gabriel, who resides over the cold, wet winds of the west, and call in the elementals. I call in the elementals of water, who are the undines. And all come into our circle now. Lend us your magic. I'd like to also go to the north and call the guardians of the watchtower of the north and the archangel Uriel, guardian of the cold, dry winds of the north. I'd like to call in the earth elementals of the gnomes. And all of the angels and elementals, lend your magic to our circle, please, and be here now. So mote it be. I'd also like to call in the goddess who is above, the mother goddess above, the Shekinah. I could also, you can call in Mother Mary if you like, or the Shekinah, or another earth goddess, or other kind of goddess. Like you can call in a fertility goddess like Demeter, various goddesses like Frigg. So we call in the goddess energy above to lend your magic to our circle now. And then we call in the God below. You can use the God, you can use Jesus Christ for the God below. You can use the god Pan. You can use the god Geb, the Egyptian god of the earth. You can use Nuit for the goddess above, who's the Egyptian goddess of the sky, and the Egyptian god Geb, who's the Egyptian god of the earth. There are various gods and goddesses you can call in, so we now call in the god for below for Nadir, the goddess for Zenith, and the god for Nadir, to create a sacred sphere around us, a sacred space that is a sphere where we are completely protected and enveloped. So mote it be. Alright, so now we're going to read about the Wiccan festival and celebration, holiday of Imbolc. It can be spelled with a C-I-M-B-O-L-C, Imbolc, or it can be spelled with a G-I, as it is here in this book, I-M-B-O-L-G. And this is page 61. And it continues on. This is not such a long one. It goes from page 61 of this wonderful book to page 71. And where currently a lot of people are celebrating Imbolc on the 1st of February, this book celebrates Imbolc on the 2nd of February, and it is chapter 4 in this book. Okay, so now I'd like to begin. We have called the 4 greater Sabbats by their Celtic names for consistency, and used the Irish Gaelic forms of those names for the reasons we gave on page 14. But Imbolg is more commonly known even among witches by the pretty name of Candlemas, under which it was Christianized, understandably enough, because this feast of lights can and should be a pretty occasion. Imbolg is I-M-B-O-L-G, pronounced Imbolg, or Imbolg is how they pronounce it, with a slight unstressed vowel between the L and the G, which means in the belly. It is the quickening of the year, the first foetal stirrings of spring in the womb of Mother Earth. Like all the Celtic great Sabbats, it is a fire festival, but here the emphasis is on light rather than heat, the strengthening spark of light beginning to pierce the gloom of winter. Farther south, where winter is less forebodingly dark, the emphasis may be the other way. Armenian Christians, for example, light their new sacred fire of the year on Candlemas Eve, not Easter as elsewhere. The moon is the light symbol of the goddess, and the moon above all stands for her threefold aspect of maid, mother, and crone, enchantment, ripeness, and wisdom. Lunar light is particularly that of inspiration, so it is fitting that Imbolc should be the feast of Brigid, Brigante, the radiant triple muse goddess who is also a fertility bringer, for at Imbolg, when the first trumpets of spring can be heard in the distance, the spirit is quickened as well as the body and the earth. Brigid, who also gave her name to Brigantia, the Celtic kingdom of the whole of the north of England, above a line from the Wash to Staffordshire, is a classic example of a pagan deity Christianized with little attempt to hide the fact, or as Fraser puts it in The Golden Bough on page 177, she is, quote, an old heathen goddess of fertility disguised in a threadbare Christian cloak, unquote. Saint Brigid's Day, La Fele Brig, pronounced approximately La Ella Brid in Ireland, is 1st February, the eve of Imbolg. The historical Saint Brigid lived from about AD 453 to 523, but her legends, characteristics, and holy places are those of the goddess Brid, and the folk customs of Saint Brigid's Day in the Celtic lands are plainly pre-Christian. So in the Celtic lands are plainly pre-Christian. It is significant that Brigid is known as the Mary of the Gale, for like Mary, she transcends the human biographical data to fill man's goddess-shaped yearning. See below, page 139. Tradition incidentally says that Saint Brigid was brought up by a wizard, and that she had the power to multiply food and drink to nourish the needy, including the delightful ability to turn her bath water into beer. The making of St. Brigid's crosses of rush or straw, and they are still widely made in Ireland both at home and for the handicraft shops, quote, is probably derived from an ancient pre-Christian ceremony connected with the preparation of the seed grain for growing in the spring, unquote. The Irish Times, 1st February of 1977, is noted here for a footnote. In Scotland, on the eve of St. Brigid Day, the women of the house would dress up a sheaf of oats in woman's clothing and lay it in a basket called Brigid's bed, side by side with a phallic club. They would then call out 3 times, quote, Brigid is come, Brid is welcome, unquote, and leave candles burning by the bed all night. If the impression of the club was found in the ashes of the hearth, in the morning, the year would be fruitful and prosperous. The ancient meaning is clear. With the use of appropriate symbols, the women of the house prepare a place for the goddess and make her welcome and invite the fertilizing god to come and impregnate her. Then they discreetly withdraw and, when the night is over, return to look for a sign of the god's visit, his footprint by the fire of the goddess of light. If the sign is there, their invocation has succeeded, and the year is pregnant with the hoped-for bounty. In the Isle of Man, a similar ritual was carried out. There, the occasion was called Lal Brichli. In northern England, the old Brigantia Candlemas was known as the Wives' Feast Day. The welcoming ritual is still part of La Fele Brid in many Irish homes. Philomena Rooney of Wexford, whose family lived near the Leitrim Donegal border, tells us she still goes home for it whenever she can. While her grandparents were still alive, the whole family would gather at their house on Saint Brigid's Eve, 31st January. Her uncle would have gathered a cartload of rushes from the farm and would bring them to the door at midnight. The ritual is always the same. Quote, the person bringing the rushes to the house covers his or her head and knocks on the door. The Bean and Tighe, woman of the house, sends someone to open the door and says to the person entering, Velte let a Brid, welcome Brigid, to which the person entering replies, Binachat der ar deon an Tighe sio. Quote, God bless the people of this house, unquote. The holy water is sprinkled on the rushes and everyone joins in making the crosses. When the crosses are made, the remaining rushes are buried, following which everyone joins in a meal. On 1st February, last year's crosses were burned and replaced with the newly made ones, unquote. In Philomena's family, 2 types were made. Her grandmother, who came from North Leitrim, made the Celtic cross, equal-armed and enclosed in a circle. Her grandfather, who came from South Donegal, made the plain equal-armed cross. She supposes that these were local traditional styles. Great importance was attached to the burning of last year's crosses. Quote, we have this thing that you should never throw out, you should burn it, unquote. Here again is the theme which recurs throughout the year's ritual cycle, the magical importance of fire. In Ireland, this land of magic wells, over 3,000 Irish holy wells are listed. There are probably more wells of Brigid than there are even of St. Patrick, which is hardly surprising because the lady was here first by untold centuries. There is a Tobar Brid, Brigid's Well, barely a mile, it's barely a mile from our first Irish home near Ferns in County Wexford, in a neighboring farmer's field. It is a very ancient spring, and the locality is known to have been holy to Brigid for a good 1,000 years, and doubtless for a very long time before that. The farmer regretfully, for he is sensitive to tradition, had to cover the well with a rock because it had become a danger to children. But he told us there were always bits of cloth to be seen tied to nearby bushes. But it was put there secretly by people invoking Brigid's help, as they had done since time immemorial. And we could literally still feel the power of the place by laying our hands on the rock. Incidentally, if like most witches you believe in the magic of names, you should pronounce Brid or bride as breed and not to rhyme with hide, as it has been somewhat harshly anglicized, for example in London's own Tobar Brid, Bridgewell. In ancient Rome, February was cleansing time, Februarius mensis, the month of ritual purification. At its beginning came the Lupercalia, when the Luperci, the priests of Pan, ran through the streets naked except for a goatskin girdle and carrying goatskin thongs. With these they struck everybody who passed, and in particular married women who were believed to be made fertile thereby. This ritual was both popular and patrician. Mark Antony is on record as having performed the Lupercus role and survived for centuries into the Christian era. Women developed a habit of stripping themselves as well to allow the Luperci more scope. Pope Gelasius I, who reigned AD 492 to 496, banned this cheerfully scandalous festival and met with such outcry that he had to apologize. It was finally abolished at the beginning of the next century. Lupercalia aside, the tradition of February cleansing remains strong. Doreen Valiente says in an ABC of Witchcraft, Past and Present, quote, "The evergreens for Yuletide decorations were holly, ivy, mistletoe, the sweet-smelling bay and rosemary, and green branches of the box tree. By Candlemas, all had to be gathered up and burnt, or hobgoblins would haunt the house." In other words, by that time, a new tide of life had started to flow through the whole world of nature, and people had to get rid of the past and look to the future. Spring cleaning was originally a nature ritual. In some parts of Ireland, we find there is a tradition of leaving the Christmas tree in place, stripped of its decorations, but retaining its lights until Candlemas. If it is kept, its green needles, good luck and fruitfulness are assured for the year ahead. One other strange Candlemas belief is widespread in the British Isles, France, Germany, and Spain. That fine weather on Candlemas Day means more winter to come, but bad weather on that day means that winter is over. Perhaps this is a kind of touchwood acknowledgement of the fact that Candlemas is the natural turning point between winter and spring, and so to be impatient about it is unlucky. In the Candlemas ritual in the Book of Shadows, the high priestess evokes the god into the high priest instead of him invoking the goddess into her. Perhaps this too, like the Scottish Brigid's bed tradition, is really a seasonal invitation to the god to impregnate the Earth Mother. We have kept to this procedure and retained the form of the invocation. The Book of Shadows also mentions the 16th century Volta dance, but we wonder if what is really meant is the very much older traditional witches' dance in which the man and woman link arms back to back. We have therefore used this earlier dance. In Christian tradition, the crown of lights is often worn by a very young girl, presumably to symbolize the extreme youth of the year. This is perfectly valid, of course, but we, with our triple goddess enactment, prefer to allot it to the mother because it is Mother Earth who is quickened at Imbolg. The preparation. The high priestess selects 2 women witches who, with herself, will represent the triple goddess, maid, enchantment, mother ripeness, and crone wisdom, and allocates the 3 roles. A crown of lights is prepared for the mother and left on or by the altar. Traditionally, the crown should be of candles or tapers, which are lit during the rituals, but this requires care and some people may be wary of it. If a candle or taper crown is made, it should be constructed firmly enough to hold them without wobbling and should incorporate a cap to protect the hair against dripping wax. You can work wonders with kitchen foil. We have found that birthday cake candles, which can be bought in packets almost anywhere, make an ideal crown of lights. They weigh practically nothing, hardly drip at all, and burn quite long enough for the purpose of the ritual. A very simple birthday candle crown can be made as follows. Get a roll of self-adhesive tape about 3/4 of an inch wide. The plain colored plastic is suitable, and cut off a length 4 or 5 inches longer than the circumference of the lady's head. Pin the sticky side upwards to a board. Stick the bottom ends of the candles across this, space out 1.5 inches apart, but leaving a good 3 inches of each end of the tape empty. Now cut a second piece of the tape of the same length as the first. Hold it sticky side downwards and apply it carefully to the first tape, molding it around the base of each candle. Unpin the ends, and you now have a neat band of candles which can be wrapped around the head, the free ends being secured together by a safety pin at the back. The candle band should be wrapped around a kitchen foil skull cap, which has been molded to the head beforehand. The foil can then be trimmed to match the bottom edge of the band. You can see the finished result in use in plate 5. In that case, it has been improved still further by fitting foil and candle band inside an existing copper crown. Incidentally, that copper crown, seen closer in plate 10 with its crescent moon front, was made for Janet by our coppersmith friend Peter Clark of Tintine the Rower, County Kilkenny. Peter supplies beautiful ritual equipment in copper or bronze, either from stock or made to your own requirements. An alternative form of the crown of lights, avoiding the wax dripping risk, is a handyman's job. A crown incorporating a number of flash lamp bulbs soldered to their leads with small batteries concealed under a Foreign Legion type piece of fabric falling over the neck, the switch being a small crocodile clip or simply two bared wire ends can be twisted together. This bulb crown can be kept from year to year and decorated with fresh foliage each time. It does, however, require some experiment in the construction. Now, both as to the distribution of the weight of the batteries and as to the components and wiring, too many bulbs in parallel will give a fine light for the first minute and then fade rapidly because of the excessive drain. If you do not like either of these, the third possibility is a crown, incorporating little mirrors, as many as possible of them facing outwards to catch the light. A bundle of straw, a foot to 18 inches long, with a straw cross piece for arms, should be dressed in woman's clothing. A doll's dress will do, or simply a cloth pinned round. If you possess a corn dolly of suitable shape for dressing, a Brigid's cross is ideal. This may be ever better. See plate 6. This figure is called a biddy, or if you prefer the Gaelic, Bredigog, pronounced Bridog. You also need a phallic wand, which can be a simple staff about the same length as the biddy, though since the Book of Shadows rituals frequently calls for a phallic wand as distinct from the coven's normal one, it is worthwhile to make yourselves a permanent version. Ours is a piece of thin branch with a pine cone secured to the tip and black and white ribbons spiraling in opposite directions along the shaft. See plate 6. Biddy and wand should be ready beside the altar together with 2 unlit candles in candle holders. Also, beside the altar is a small bouquet of greenery, as spring-like as possible and incorporating spring flowers if you can get them, for the woman who portrays the maid, and a dark-colored scarf or cloak for the crone. The broomstick, the traditional witch's besom of twigs, is by the altar too. The cauldron with a candle burning inside it is placed beside the south candle. By the cauldron are laid 3 or 4 twigs of evergreen or dried vegetation, such as holly, ivy, mistletoe, bay, rosemary, or box. If, like us, you follow the tradition of keeping the Christmas tree without its decorations, but with its lights, in the house till Candlemas, it should, if practicable, be in the room where the circle is held, with all its lights lit. The opening ritual is shorter for Imbolg. This subchapter is called the ritual here. Again, the opening ritual is shorter for Imbolg. The high priest does not draw down the moon on the high priestess, nor does he make the great god Cernunnos invocation, and the charge it's not declaimed until later. After the witch's rune, all the working partners, including the high priestess and high priest, dance back to back in couples with their arms hooked through each other's elbows. Unpartnered witches dance solo, though after a while partners break up and recombine with unpartnered ones so that everybody can take part. When the high priestess decides that the dancing has gone on long enough, she stops it, and the coven arrange themselves around the circle facing inwards. The high priest stands with his back to the altar, and the high priestess faces him. The high priest gives the high priestess the fivefold kiss. Then she in turn gives him the fivefold kiss. The high priest takes the wand in his right hand and the scourge in his left, and assumes the Osiris position. See page 40. The high priestess, facing the high priest as he stands before the altar, invokes, "Dread Lord of death and resurrection, of life and the giver of life, Lord within ourselves, whose name is mystery of mysteries, encourage our hearts. Let thy light crystallize itself in our blood, fulfilling of us resurrection, for there is no part of us that is not of the gods. Descend, we pray thee, upon thy servant and priest." And just a footnote here, lines 3 to 5 of this invocation that we just read are from Crowley's Gnostic Mass. That would be Aleister Crowley's Gnostic Mass. Continuing here with 8 Sabbats for Witches, the high priest draws the invoking pentagram of earth in the air towards the high priestess and says, "Blessed be." The high priest steps to one side while the high priestess and the women of the coven prepare Brigid's bed. They lay the biddy and the phallic wand side by side in the center of the circle with the heads towards the altar. They place the candlesticks on either side of the bed and light the candles. See plate 6. And an aside here, we are going to show you these plates at the end of this reading. Now continuing with Imbolc, 2nd February, 8 Sabbats for Witches, high priestess and women stand round the bed and say together, "Brid is come, Brid is welcome," repeated 3 times. The high priest lays down his wand and scourge on the altar. The high priestess summons the 2 selected women. She and they now assume their triple goddess roles. See plate 5. The mother stands with her back to the center of the altar, and the high priest crowns her with the crown of lights. The maid and crone arrange her hair becomingly, and the high priest lights the tapers on the crown or switches on the bulbs. The crone now stands beside the mother to her left, and the high priest and the maid drape the shawl or cloak over her shoulders. The maid now stands beside the mother to her right, and the high priest puts the bouquet into her hands. The high priest goes to the south, where he stands facing the 3 women. He declaims, quote, "Behold the 3-formed goddess, she who is ever 3, maid, mother, and crone, yet is she ever one. For without spring there can be no summer, without summer no winter, without winter no new spring," unquote. The high priest then delivers the charge in its entirety from, quote, "Listen to the words of the Great Mother," unquote, right to, quote, "That which is attained at the end of desire," unquote, but substituting she, her, hers for I, me, my, and mine. I, me, my, mine. When she has finished, the maid takes up the broomstick and makes her way slowly deosil around the circle, ritually sweeping it clear of all that is old and outworn. The mother and the crone walk behind her in stately procession. The maid then replaces the broom beside the altar, and the 3 women resume their places in front of the altar. The high priest then runs and kneels before the cauldron. He picks up each of the ever green twigs in turn, sets fire to each from the cauldron candle, blows a twig out, and puts it in the cauldron beside the candle. This symbolic burning is all that is advisable in a small room because of smoke. Now, out of doors or in a large room, they may be burned away completely. As he does this, he declaims, quote, "Thus we banish winter, thus we welcome spring. Say farewell to what is dead, and greet each living thing. Thus we banish winter, thus we welcome spring." Unquote. The high priest goes to the mother, blows out or switches off the crown of lights, and removes it from the mother's head. On this signal, the maid lays her bouquet and the crone her shawl or cloak beside the altar, and the high priest lays the crown of lights there also. The high priest steps aside, and the three women fetch the biddy, the phallic wand, and the candles, which they extinguish from the center of the Celtic circle and lay them beside the altar. The great rite is now enacted. After the cakes and wine, a suitable game for Imbolc is the candle game. The men sit in a ring facing inwards, close enough to reach each other, and the women stand behind them. The men pass a lighted candle deal seal from hand to hand, while the women, without stepping inside the ring of men, lean forward and try to blow it out. When a woman succeeds, she gives 3 flicks of the scourge to the man who was holding it at the time, and he gives her the 5-fold kiss in return. The candle is then relit and the game continues. If the custom of keeping the Christmas tree till Candlemas has been observed, the tree must be taken out of the house and disposed of as soon as possible after the ritual. And this concludes Imbolc, 2nd of February, from 8 Sabbats for Witches by Janet Stewart Farrar. And notice here the coven of witches holding hands, making a ring around the moon. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show you the plates and that he had instructed us, the illustrations that instructed us to show you, and we're going to read the captions to you, and then we will close our circle going counterclockwise or widdershins, and then we will close the sacred time by ringing the bell. All right, now we're going to show you the plates, the pictures, these photographic plates that we were instructed to show you as we read chapter 4 on Imbolg from 8 Sabbats for Witches, and Imbolg, February 2nd in this book for Imbolg. Now, the first plate that we're going to show you is this plate here. The one over here is for Beltanes. We're not showing you this one. We're showing you this one. We're going to show these two here. So it's diagonal. Plate 5 and 6. I'm just going to show you plate 10 because it talked about another taking on a position of Osiris, yes? So this plate here, number 5, shows for Imbolg specifically the maiden, the mother, and the crone. The triple goddess. This is the triple goddess, maiden, mother, crone. This is why you see the moon represented with a crescent and then a full moon and then another crescent. It's demonstrating the moon going this way is a waxing moon, that's the maiden, then the mother, the full moon, and then the crone with the crescent going this way, which is a waning moon. So this exactly matches the crescent moon symbol with the full moon in the center. And there's 3 represented. There's 3 represented for the triple goddess, the triple goddess image. All right, now this picture here, this photographic plate, it shows people standing around, and it's standing around Brigid's bed. This is the I guess it's called the biddy and the phallic wand, and they have candles here, and the people standing here sort of a ritual for fertility rituals, to make sure that not only do they have proper food and proper, with the animals and also the farming and cultivation of the earth, but also that they have plenty of offspring with which to build their village. Yeah. Now we're going to go to the plate number 10. And we're going to show you Osiris's position. It's taken from Osiris of Egypt, and you often will see you will often see a pharaoh take this position with the scourge and the kiss, and it's the pharaoh who is reigning over, ruling over both pain and pleasure, and the whip and the kiss, pain and pleasure, so that people are herded in certain directions, so that people are properly herded. Like one would offer a treat to an animal to get it to do a trick, and then give it something it doesn't like if it does something wrong. That kind of a thing. Okay, so this is plate number 10, or we're not dealing with this one right now. This one is just talking about that it's nice to be outdoors for rituals when privacy permits. That wasn't recommended that we necessarily talk about this one, but it's certainly wonderful to do Wiccan rituals or witchcraft rituals or pagan rituals outside. Certainly wonderful. And so this again is more from Egypt, and you see here you have the high priestess taking on the form of Osiris. Even though Osiris is a god, she's just taking on the form of Osiris here, or the pharaoh. The wand and the scourge held in the Osiris position. They use a wand and a scourge, or a wand and a kiss, instead of a crook and a whip. There can be different things that people use, but here they're using a wand and a scourge. Again, this is directly from Egyptian tradition and ritual. And here the high priestess is taking on this god form, or goddess. This is a god form. You can take on goddess forms or god forms. And that's what actors and musicians do. They take on god or goddess forms very often. Or it really is what makes it, it's to where it becomes like a ritual, yeah? Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and close the circle. And we're going to go counterclockwise, or Widdershins, in order to close it. And we're going to then again, we'll be using the bell, ring it 3 times in order to let go of the sacred time. So now we're undoing the sacred space. And we're going to start in the north, because we started in the east and went to the north, and you also go completely to the other one. You complete the circle, and then so now we're going to go from north to east and complete the circle. I call upon the guardians of the watchtower of the north, upon Archangel Uriel, and upon the earth gnomes, the earth elementals, the gnomes. Thank you for lending your magic to our circle. And please come again when we call you. And now call upon the guardians of the watchtower of the west, the guardians who are the Archangel of Water Gabriel, and the Watcher Elementals, the Undines. Thank you for lending your magic to our circle, and please come again when we call. Call upon the guardians of the watchtower of the south, the Archangel Michael, and also the elementals of fire, the salamanders. Thank you for lending your magic to our circle. And please come again when we require that you come and join our circle again. I now call upon the guardians of the Watchtower of the East. I call upon the Archangel Raphael and the air elementals, the sylphs. Thank you for lending your magic to our circle. And please come again when we call you. I now call upon the goddess, the Shekinah glory, Mother Mary, and Nuit. Thank you for lending your magic to our circle and your light. And please come again when we call you to our circle. I call upon the gods below. Jesus Christ, God Neb, the God Geb and Pan, gods of the earth, thank you for lending your magic to our circle. Please come again when we call. To all of these beings and entities, you are dismissed now. Thank you once again. I now close our sacred space, and now I close our sacred time. So mote it be. Blessed be from the Goodly Christian Witch, and we'll see you for our next installment.